Welcome everybody. This is the Science Bridge webinar, Beaker Half Full, and today we are going to chat with Dr. Evodia Setati. Dr. Evodia Setati is a chief researcher at Wine Institute at the University of Stellenbosch, and she's also a co-author of Holding the Knife's Edge: Journey of a Black Female Scientist. And she also works as a professional coach in Bipenio Consulting Company. So hello, Dr. Setati.
Good afternoon, Martina. Thank you so much for inviting me for this interview.
No, it's an absolute pleasure because it's for me very important to show that you as a scientist, you can be also having a lot of different interests and accolades, including professional coaching. So it's an absolute pleasure to talk with you about it.
Thank you.
So can you tell us maybe something about your career? How did you get to the position of the chief researcher scientist at the Wine Institute? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so I've been with the institute now for a decade, but I was trained as a microbiologist, so I'm a microbiologist by training. I don't come from the system of modules and programs and so on. So I majored in microbiology and physiology in my undergraduate, and then I obviously then did honors and masters and all the way to PhD in microbiology. And when I started my career, when my PhD was actually focused on working on plant cell wall degrading enzymes. And when I finished, I did a one-year postdoctoral fellowship at University of the Free State, where we were working on alkane metabolism in a yeast called Yarovia lipolytica, focusing on converting petroleum waste to dioic acids, which are compounds that can be used in cosmetics and so on. But then when I had to start my own research, I was more interested in extreme environments. So when I started my own research group, I was focused on the microbial ecology of salt pans, so high salt environments and crystallizer ponds. And I did that for about 7 years. So for 7 years or so, my research was focused on that. And when an opening came up at Stellenbosch University with an interest on somebody who would be focusing on metagenomics and microbial ecology of the vineyard and of fermentation processes, I saw it fit to switch, focus areas, because in terms of skills and knowledge that needed to be applied, it was the skills that I already had that I was applying just in a different environment in a way. So it was microbial ecology of extreme environments, and now it's microbial ecology in a vineyard and in a wine fermentation process. So that was pretty much a very easy shift for me, and I chose this shift because when I was at Free State and even when I was at University of KwaZulu-Natal, where I spent 4 years, I was in a lecturing position. So the teaching component was quite high. And the position that was opening here at Stellenbosch was a researcher position. So with more focus on research and a small component on the teaching, which for me was like the sweet spot. I want to teach, but not so much that it just overwhelms me. And so this was a sweet spot and a nice shift for me. So yeah, so then
I got, understand, yes.
Yeah, from researcher, senior researcher to chief researcher. So it just, yeah.
And also getting back hands-on, dirty hands-on into the lab. So that's quite interesting, I guess, for you in your case.
Yes, I love the lab environment. I have always said when it comes to research or to scientific work that I'm not the kind of person who would do routine laboratory work, but I love a challenge and I love to, come up with ideas, explore them and see how they work out and so on. So I enjoy the research space much more than, the teaching space. So, yeah.
Now I understand everybody has their own preferences, and that's the beauty of the world, that we can, there is a space for everyone and every interest possible, actually.
Yes.
So what happened between being a chief researcher and then suddenly doing your master's in professional coaching and becoming a professional coach? Why such a change?
Yeah, so that it wasn't a sudden change per se. Actually, it was a change that I guess was to some extent inspired by the kind of person that I am. So for me, I'm a person who really has a love of learning, and I value very much my personal growth, and I invest a lot in my personal growth. So I took to the decision to do, an MPhil in management coaching, purely from a constant evaluation and a reflection on who I am as a person and who I want to become. And it was through realizing that I was at a point in my life where I had a lot of tension. I felt like either I'm miscommunicating or I'm being misunderstood or something is not working. So the communication between between me and my student, because my work as a researcher, I deal more with postgraduate students and less with undergraduate students. But I seemed to find myself a lot more feeling like either I'm not communicating things well or somebody is not, but clearly things are not working. And I felt that there must be a different way of communicating. So then I went about trying to figure out how to learn to communicate differently. And that's when I came about the master's in management coaching at the business school at Stellenbosch. And when I read what it had to offer, I thought, hang on, this is a space where I can learn, different communication skills, different ways of listening, and just improving myself in terms of how I deal and communicate with people. So that's how I ended up spending 2 years doing a master's.
So that's quite a commitment. 2 years, it's quite a long journey. So do you think that any supervisor who struggles with students should either go to the coach or to do their own master's in communication and coaching?
I don't think they need to do their own masters. I think you can consult a coach, and have sessions. I mean, it doesn't have to be a year-long commitment. You can have 4 sessions with a coach. The person can help you deal with whatever issues that you identify. They can help you, take the next step, make changes where changes need to be made, and so on. Yeah.
And what type of issues do you think that can arise in a relationship between a supervisor and a student?
I think for the bigger part, supervisors learn how to supervise or how not to supervise from their previous supervisors, right? There isn't really if I can say, there isn't a teaching program that says this is how you become a supervisor. And because you deal with people, all students are different. So which means that there isn't really a manual, because you have to deal with the kind of personality that is in front of you. So you have to adapt, as a supervisor, you're constantly adapting to who your students are, and you have to be flexible in a way, and you have to learn to read people and understand them. So I feel like, yeah, you learn from previous supervisors, you learn with current colleagues how to become a supervisor, but there isn't a formula. And in a way, it's tricky becoming a supervisor.
No, I can imagine. Yeah. I haven't been supervisor myself. I've been supervised with quite a lot of people I've been working with, and there are different issues, and everybody is different, has different backgrounds, and that can cause tensions because of that miscommunication that you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have issues between student and supervisor. I always feel that it's a communication issue, because you have a student comes in with certain expectations, and a supervisor has certain expectations. And sometimes those expectations are not well communicated, and that in its own creates a problem. And sometimes you learn certain things when you were a student, and you thought, this is what works, this is how it should be done. And the student comes in and they have certain expectations, and you think, but that's not what I did with my supervisor. And, so yeah.
No, definitely. And also, I guess the Cherokee system at the university is quite a tricky one, because on one hand, you have a formal structure where you have undergrad, postgrad, postdocs, and the PIs. And on the other hand, people try to stay on very less formal ways of communicating, so that they can basically cross certain boundaries. And all of that is very tricky, I guess.
Yeah, it is, but I think it can be managed. I think I consider myself to be one of those that doesn't have, I came from a system where I had supervisors who said, no, don't call me professor this and don't call me that. So I sort of grew up in that system where I don't have to feel like, oh my God, this is a professor and this is, so that's how I interact with my students anyway. But I think they know that I can hold them accountable, and I can, if they are crossing the line, they will know immediately. It's not going to take 2 seconds. They will know immediately that, no, I might seem like I'm very friendly, but we are not friends. I'm still your supervisor, you're a student, and this is how things work. So I think it's just important to keep those boundaries very clear, but I think to still be approachable.
Yeah, absolutely. Then that's more like inspiring environment, I guess, that you can still approach and have the productive conversation instead of having very polite, respectful, away from creative process conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just remind me of a recent conversation that we had because we had our group meeting, and I made a comment at some point, and then I had to call back the student and say, wait, I think I'm wrong here. And the student was really surprised, like, oh my God, you are wrong. How is this possible? And I find that this is something which I constantly have to remind students that, supervisors are human. I don't know everything. I also have to go and read about topics to come and guide you on some things. And sometimes you know more than I do, because the techniques and the methods and the new literature that is coming up, you are more engaged with it than I am. And so, sometimes you will know more than I do. And I have found that students tend to hesitate with that. Sometimes are using a new software. And I remember one time I said to these students in our lab, I said, no, you go and attend the workshop and then you can come and teach me. And they were all very hesitant to teach me. In the end, I taught myself, because as far as they were concerned, there's no way they would teach me. So these kind of things I always find quite interesting, that even the hierarchy, even when you're trying to not have this hierarchical system, the students themselves can actually implement that and just decide, no, you know more than I do, and you will always know more than I do, and there's no way I can teach you something. But yeah, it's always fascinating to observe.
Yeah, especially in science, I guess there is so much progress and so much new literature coming out that it's actually very hard to keep up with everything. And it's good to have this easy connection, being approachable, so that even the old school professors, I would say, can stay approachable and humble, in a sense that science is developing constantly and things do change.
Yeah.
So please tell me, when you're working with your clients, what type of topic, what type of interactions do you prefer? How do they go?
Yeah, so when I did the master's in coaching, I always told myself that I will stay within my space, if I can put it that way. So my focus has always been to coach early career scientists or early career academics, so PhD students, postdoctoral fellows, early, academics, young academics, if I can put it that way. And often these are people who are trying to figure out who they want to be as a scientist, as an academic, what direction they should take, how they should, create their space in a be it research institute, be it academic institution, and so on. And so often you find that these issues like communication, when I am dealing with a PhD student or a postdoctoral fellow, especially those who remain postdoctoral fellows of the person who was their PhD supervisor, because you are growing from being a PhD student to a postdoctoral fellow, and even being the person's colleague. But somehow it tends to not register in the other person's mind that, by the way, this is no longer my student. The communication level tends to remain like, they're expecting the same things as you were when you were a PhD student. So often it's issues having to deal with communication. How do I put this message across to my supervisor, to my line manager, without coming across in an offensive way, without seeming like I'm a difficult person to deal with? So those kind of issues are often at the table to say, but how do I go and sit in the meeting with this person and this person and make sure that by the time I walk out, my issues have been attended to in a satisfactory manner?
Yes.
So that's one of the issues. And then with the early career scientists also, sometimes, I think we have a lot of situations where people choose to do a master's and even continue to a PhD, not because they wanted to do a PhD, So it's very rare. Sometimes you find people have done a PhD because when they finish their master's, the job wasn't coming quick enough, and then they you become a bit concerned. Wow, am I going to stay for 6 months, a year without a job? And then they just decide, to be on the safe side, let me do a PhD. or the supervisor convinces them, no, but you're such a good researcher, when they're towards the end of their masters and so on. And then, they fall for that in some way, like, oh, okay, maybe I'm doubting myself, but this person seems to think that I will do very well. Then they continue with a PhD. And so that means that you choose to follow a certain path, but this might not necessarily be well aligned with who you want to become. So it gets a bit frustrating, and you start to get lost when you start your career, because you've started this thing, but that's not necessarily what you wanted to become. And now it's here, and now you have to make it work. And so sometimes you find that those beginning stages, it's like very stagnant and confusing, because now there's the person who was the supervisor, for instance, who convinced you to do a PhD is no longer there to hold you by the hand and say, well, now this is the next step, and this is the next step, and this is the next step. So that transitioning and dealing with, how do I now make this work? And also dealing with, maybe I can just say, well, I have a PhD, done, dusted, I'm happy, but this is not who I wanted to be. Now I can go start a new career, because that is also a fear in people to say, but how do I now address the issue that I did a PhD in chemistry and now I want to go and work, in a completely different sector? So those are some of the issues that tend to be on the table when you're dealing with early career young people. And
Now that sounds actually very, very familiar. And I think a lot of people don't know what they should actually look for when they are looking for their jobs. They will just put in a generic name of, I want to become a scientist, but they don't know that there are different terms that they can look for on the job search. And then they don't understand what are the responsibilities coming with that. So they feel that, I'm talking from my own experience, my peers' experience, let's say, and then you end up doing next step at the academic environment, because that's what feels familiar, and getting out of your comfort zone is so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess then explaining your family, it's another tricky bit, because you spend, say, 5 years of education and suddenly you want to do something else.
Yeah. It's a bit tricky, because sometimes we underestimate family expectations and family pressures until you come to that end, and then you realize, but my family, be it your siblings, be it your parents, be it your extended family, uncle, aunt, this one, are walking around going, no, but she has a PhD in chemistry, she's doctor, and now you're like, yeah, but I don't have an interest in that, and and suddenly it's like, oh my God, these people are walking around and they're so happy, so proud, and now I have to explain to them that actually, nah, I want to go and, build a creche and work with kids and, type of situation. So,
but it's also interesting, if I think about it, even if you pursued science and you then want to work with kids, you can always apply the knowledge that you got in a creative way.
Yeah.
And
yes.
you need to figure it out how to apply it in creative way to create, a use of what you have.
Yeah.
Just in different way, and always possible.
So that's the thing, because that's what becomes part of the conversation, to say, well, how do you still make this that achievement useful in a different environment? So you are not necessarily going to be an academic at an at a tertiary institution. You're not going to sit in some lab with part of the R&D team of whatever company and so on. But how do you take your knowledge and apply it elsewhere? How do you you can make your if you decide it's a daycare center, it's a creche, you can establish small experiments with children that make chemistry fun for children. Your PhD in chemistry can work at a crash. You know, you can make small toolkits for children to experiment with, and before you know it, you might actually have a product that is selling on the market for children that is based off of your PhD in chemistry, but you didn't think that it would work out that way, you know. So I think it's that becomes part of the coaching process to help the person identify other opportunities and different ways to still apply themselves.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, our viewers will get so much information from this conversation just to start thinking outside of the box and start dreaming again, because sometimes I guess we are forgetting about our dreams just because we feel stuck. And especially now with pandemic, when we are sitting around and doing nothing and you stare at the wall and you get frustrated.
True.
So can you tell us where people can find you actually to get in touch with you and maybe get some coaching, whether it is becoming a different type of scientist, creating a new career, or just getting help with communicating with students, peers, and supervisors?
Yeah, so I think I'm one of those people who are very easy to find for some reason, because I always use my name for everything. So I don't have any hidden names. So on Twitter, I go by my name, Evodia Setati. Well, Evodia _ Setati, and it's the same thing on LinkedIn. I use my name as it is, Evodia Setati. And people can also email me on my Gmail, which is evodia.setati@gmail.com. So
well, that sounds quite easy, but I'll still include it in the link below this video so that everybody can find you easily, not make any mistakes in the name. So all of that will be attached to this video. Thank you so much for this conversation. And do you have any last thoughts that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's always important for us as people to always review who we want to become. I think you always have to, whatever you do, whatever frustrations you have in life, in the course that you are traveling, you always have to go back to self and say, who do I want to become? And focus your energy on that. I think a lot of times people get quickly frustrated and lose their focus because you look around, you look at your peers and you can see, oh my God, that one, you know, finished her PhD in 3 years, or that one finished and already secured a job, and that one, but you have to look at who you want to become and say, am I doing what I need to do to become the best of me? Because if you're not focusing on that, you're not going to find that job because your eye is on the other person and not on who you want to become. So I think it's always important to keep the focus on who you want to become and not what other people want you to become or what other people are doing.
Now, that sounds very true. I completely agree with this thought. You have to internalize for a second and think about your own why, because it's individual journey. It's your own life.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for today, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martina. Thank you so much.